Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Pod and the Pendulum. I'm your host, Mike, and I'm joined once again in the co-host chair by my own whistler, Mr. Devaughn Taylor, as we wrap up the Blade series this week with 2004's Blade Trinity. And what a discussion.
I guess, we can swap for this one because, looking at us, you are definitely the whistler and I am the Blade between the two of us. But we can trade for this third one.
As soon as I said that, I thought that. I'm like, God damn, you're right. It left my mouth, and I'm like, this is bad. So we are about 45 seconds in, and I have turned the show into a hate crime. Excellent. Devaughn, how are we?
It's very apt for Trinity. I'm fantastic. I am officially in the 30 club, and
Happy
this is also
birthday.
Thank you, and this is also perfect that this will be coming out. It's Pride Month, and this is a very important in my bisexual awakening, so we'll discuss that as well. I'm very excited.
You know what? Do you want to start with that, or do you want to leave that for the movie discussion?
We'll definitely be getting into it, but because there's a lot of people to thirst over in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously,
this cast is amazing.
Great cast, very hot cast. And, obviously the Mummy gets, a lot of people talk about that being a bisexual awakening for people. And it is, of course, honestly, Brendan Fraser and Elizabeth Hurley in Bedazzled, even more so. But this film, I remember watching it, again, this came out, 2004?
2004.
So I was 10-ish around this point. And I remember watching and looking at Ryan Reynolds and Parker Posey during that interrogation scene, and I was like, I want to kiss both of them. I was like, that's interesting. And then I remember, and then the Amityville remake came out the next year, and again, shirtless Ryan Reynolds. I was like, there's something I kind of like what I'm looking at with this guy, and so every time I think about Parker Posey and Ryan Reynolds in this film, definitely create some early stirs in my feelings whenever I was younger.
Do you think Posey's character has a bit of like a David Bowie androgynous look going for her? Like the style, the hair, as you're saying this, yeah.
Because she wears heels. She wears heels, but she also wears suits. Her she has a ridiculous haircut, as Hannibal does point out. She does have that, and there's a line that she has in that scene as well. She goes, "How about we all stop saying the word dick? It only increases my envy." So yes. I was like, that feels very pointed. So it was like, is she? I was like, non-binary Danica in this film? Maybe. Who's to say?
Quite possibly.
I also got more support evidence for my asexual Blade theory as well in this movie.
Interesting.
Ace icon Blade. We'll discuss.
I may have some evidence to refute that. I may have some behind the scenes evidence to refute that in there. That I think. You know what? Textually, you may be correct. The way it is on screen may be correct. And I think one Mr. Snipes wanted to push back against that a little bit. He's
that's funny, actually. I can totally see that.
He's like, can this be the movie where Blade fucks? Like, can that be something? And who can blame him? So let's talk a little bit. Well, really, let's talk a lot about the background of this movie, because the background of this movie, I think, is way more interesting than the movie itself. This is going to be a wild one. But before we get into that, it's 2004. Superhero movies, they haven't quite hit blast off point, which I think is 2008 with The Dark Knight and Iron Man, where Hollywood is like, whoa, this is a genre that like we can supercharge at the box office. But it's a different landscape from the 90s and the late 90s when Blade came out, where superhero movies were an afterthought. It's what has changed by right now. By the time Trinity comes out in December of 2004, what's changed for superhero movies, and what about the expectations and the reception that like Trinity's going to receive because of those expectations?
I think it's interesting because I feel like this film itself was impacted, and it's funny, like, going back a few episodes on how, this feels so much, or the original Blade feels so much not like a superhero comic book movie, versus now, by the time we get to Trinity does. It is starting to, they are, starting to go in on the formula that has happened at the time, because by the time Blade Trinity is released, we have 2 X-Men films, we have 2 Spider-Man films. Daredevil just came out the year prior, so like they're starting to get pumped out a little bit more. I think was the first Punisher movie out by this point? I think
I believe so.
Yes,
also
in 2004. Yeah, also in 2004. So they're starting to get pumped out a little bit more. And again, Goyer has had his hand in multiple different superhero things as well. So it's like, obviously, you can kind of also see him starting to get influenced by the current superhero movie landscape. Because again, like, this feels like, we have our big bad, we have our secondary bads, like we have, the plan is, very, convoluted and whatnot. Like, it feels more comic booky in this one compared to the previous ones. And again, so it's like, I don't know if they were, thinking that, like, Blade wouldn't be able to still stand on its own if it didn't adhere to, some of the things that the X-Men movies were doing, or some of the things that the Spider-Man movies were doing. I feel like they were kind of going for that a little bit rather than sticking to Blade, what Blade 1 and 2 did. Yeah,
and it kind of feels, too, because the X-Men movies are massive hits, massive crossover hits, especially the second movie. Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 set box office records. I mean, they make Spider-Man 2 might be the best superhero movie of all time still to this day. And when they re-released all of the Spider-Man movies, like this past spring, into theaters to kind of celebrate the anniversary of some of these releases, like those first 2 Spider-Man movies were the ones that kind of came out top at the box office because people that had grown up on them, now we wanted to bring our kids to those movies. But they had kind of demonstrated that there was no ceiling for this type of movie anymore, that like the audiences would come out if you take the material seriously, if you give it an A cast, if you give it an A-list directors, people will turn out for these movies. And it almost feels like at this point, Blade, which had kicked the door open for Marvel and had given a more serious take, had put a little bit of money into the movies, and given something that had been not campy at all, and something a bit darker, a bit more serious, with some touches of humor, but also had a lot of great action, a lot of great horror elements in it. Now by the third movie, it's almost like, okay, we know we're not going to get to a level of X-Men and Spider-Man with a Blade movie, so it's almost like they're ready to write this character off, and to put like the proverbial stake in the character and leave him behind and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, like this definitely felt, again, like kind of going more into where it's like it's not as focused on the character, it's focused on the world now. Like this is like, the world, we gotta again, we have, layers, with the humans and the familiars and the vampires, and then bringing Dracula in. And so it's like, it's all about the world. And then we're bringing in the Night Stalkers now, which, this film was, kind of supposed to be like a jumping off point to then do a spin-off of the Night Stalkers. So yeah, very much so. They were kind of being like, hey, we can still be in the Blade world without Blade. Though the TV series is technically canon, or like does come after like the films, which I didn't get a chance to watch. Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
I did not have time for sticky fingers, but yeah, like this very much is like kind of the okay, like we've established Blade and we used him as the vessel to get into this vampire comic book universe, and now we're gonna see like what angles we can potentially do with that.
Yeah, and it feels like Dracula is always going to be your final boss in a vampire series. Like once you bring and introduce Dracula into the picture, there's really no going to another villain. Like that's about as big as it's going to get. And unless you're going to bring him back again and again, it's really hard to kind of stick in the world of vampires, which, as we'll talk about, by the end of this movie, they kill off every vampire. So you'd have to kind of go in a different direction if you're going to do anything at all by the end of this movie.
Well, they were. Did you watch the alternate ending?
I did. And we'll definitely talk about that.
So they had planned.
Calcifer has opinions.
Calcifer does have opinions on Blade Trinity. Yeah, they had some angles, but then I think with the direction that they were trying to go in, again, like just staying in the world and not focusing on Blade, you can definitely tell that rubbed Mr. Snipes definitely rubbed Mr. Snipes the wrong way. And I think that is probably the catalyst of a lot of the behind the scenes shenanigans that were happening.
I can't wait to talk about those shenanigans, but before we do, let's talk a little bit about some of those people they brought in, because this is an absolutely stacked cast from top to bottom. It's amazing. Even just some people they bring in for just a couple scenes that have very small roles, all had been pretty well established at this point, or would go on to have terrific runs later on, like starting with like Parker Posey, who really like an indie movie darling. She does a lot of the Christopher Guest mockumentaries, but she's also like someone who's not afraid to do what I would call the like I need myself some beachfront property movies, where she'll take a paycheck and do a Scream 3. She'll take a paycheck and do a Blade Trinity. She even said, like, I did this movie because it's not the kind of thing that I don't necessarily get to do all the time. It's a really good check. It's a really fun shoot. I get to stretch my legs out and do a different kind of acting. It's something that she's not necessarily known for, and she really goes for it here. Like, to me, she is one of the highlights of this movie. Like, she is just very, very watchable in this movie.
I mean, that's just kind of what Parker Posey does. She just comes in and it's just like, can be that. Like, I think she is one of the best parts of Scream 3. Like, her and Gail, their scenes together are some of my favorite things in that entire film. And man, I mean, yeah, like indie dark, like this is like kind of, she's more like in more in the 90s, like kind of stuff. And so like, I can definitely see this being like, yeah, it's a paycheck thing, but like, hey, I get to wear some cool outfits. I get to wear vampire fangs. I get to yell at people. I get to, put a heel in Ryan Reynolds' chest. So like, there's a lot of fun to be had in this. And like, and does she stretch them legs out? Because again, 10-year-old Devaughn, seeing her in those heels, I was like, this is doing something for me. But yeah, she very much just has such a great commanding presence. Like, I love how in Beau is Afraid, she comes in the third act, or like in like the third or fourth act, and then, steals the movie away for like 3 scenes. Because she is just like that talented, and I think she's having a lot of fun here. And even if this is a paycheck movie, like she's definitely like not phoning it in. Like, she's having a good time. She's whispering menacingly and like doing weird things with her hair and stuff. Like, she's out here trying and putting the work in. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, you get Jessica Biel. And I'm wondering if, like, this is coming, like, just off of her peak. Like, is Jessica Biel ever going to be more in demand than she is after, like, or coming into this movie? Because she had, like, anchored a teen melodrama for the WB network, I think Seventh Heaven. Like, not a show that I ever watched, but I know that it had millions of fans. So she does that, and she pivots, like a lot of young actors did, that did these like teen shows for the WB or UPN or Fox. once you star in those for a few seasons, you immediately pivot to horror, and she anchors the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. That pulls in over $80 million in the U.S. alone, and it kickstarts the whole remake trend that was going to be big business for the rest of the decade. Like, you look at horror movies in the first decade of the century, and it's marked by two things. It's marked by remaking all these classic horror movies, and it's marked by extreme horror, like torture porn is what we called it when we did The Purge and our Saw movies. And to me, like, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie is one that kind of has a hand in both kickstarting both of those trends. Like, I don't think she's ever going to be more in demand than she's going to be at this point.
No, for sure. She was doing definitely the classic, I need to show the people I have range. So, she does a bunch of different genre stuff, whether it be in the horror realm, whether it be in the action realm. She was doing stuff like Stealth around this time. She would go on and do the A-Team adaptation. She was in The Illusionist, awful movie. But she's doing a lot of variety to, again, show, like, because everybody saw her in Seventh Heaven as one thing for so long. So she was, definitely doing different things to break her mold. And I appreciate that. Like, she like has around in these early aughts, like she has doing all sorts of different types of stuff.
Yeah. She has a pretty interesting career with, like, genre pictures. Like, she did... I remember, like, way back in, like, turn of the decade, like, she did this kind of psychological horror movie called The Tall Man that, if I remember, it wound up, like, being less supernatural and more about child trafficking, and it was trying her to kind of pivot to indie horror. She plays Vera Miles in the Hitchcock biopic, like Vera Miles being... the actor that Hitchcock famously basically drove out of Hollywood after a couple pictures. Like, he wanted to make her his next Grace Kelly, and it wound up being a very, very toxic relationship. I won't kind of dive into that. I don't have all the details at my fingertips. But I think it...
Oh, no,
What's that? I would say, like, anything Hitchcock related. Listeners, go to Talking Hitchcock, hosted by Rebecca McCallum, the best Hitchcock expert I know. So listen to Talking Hitchcock, and she can give you all the details. Last thing I saw her in, we watched a couple episodes of the miniseries Candy, where she plays a wife who murders her husband, and it's a much different role. I think that was on Hulu.
She has certainly an interesting look for her, and I'm looking at the poster for it, and these this haircut and glasses are killing me. But ain't good.
It's at the we watched what we watched was good. I don't know why we didn't finish it. I think that kind of fell prey to, like, there's too much TV. So maybe we have to go back and watch
Melanie
that.
Linsky and Pablo Schreiber. Okay.
Yeah. Young Ryan Reynolds. I'll let you take this one since he's part of your awakening. Where is Mr. Mint Mobile at this point in his career?
So Ryan Reynolds is kind of doing a similar thing. He is around this time doing a lot of different genre things because he was a funny guy. He was Van Wilder is what people were mainly knew him for. So, like, this is the time where he's like, and he's an early pioneer of the comedy guy getting shredded for a comic book movie trope that we see so commonly now in the MCU and other superhero properties. So Ryan Reynolds, first to do it. Ryan Reynolds also has done many different superhero adaptations, throughout his career. This was one of the first in that, because this is prior to Green Lantern. This is prior to X-Men Origins Wolverine as well. So it's kind of crazy. I mean, the guy loves superheroes. But yeah, around this time in like between like 2004 through like I would say like 2010, 2012, he was doing a really good mixture of like, you know, stuff that, you know, was going to the big screen, whether it be the rom-coms or the action stuff, but then he was also doing like indie work as well. You know, so he has quite a at this time a, you know, wildly varied filmography, and it's kind of crazy how that has changed in the recent, you know, 6 years or so, where it's just like he seems to be making just all the same movies. They all look exactly the same. They all look plastic. I don't know, you know, but like around this time, you know, he was doing a lot of stuff like Chaos Theory. The Nines is like a super weird movie. Did Smokin' Aces, which is the name of my volleyball team.
There you go.
And he's pretty good in that as well. He did still do Waiting in 2005, so he still wasn't giving up the goofy stuff quite yet. But he was mixing it up around this time.
I remember seeing him in Van Wilder. I remember my then roommate and we went to see Frailty first, and that movie freaked us out so much that we're like, what else is playing right now that we can just like sneak into? Because like we don't want to go home. Like Frailty like fucked us up. That movie is awesome. And we went to Van Wilder and just laughed our asses off. Like had a really good time with that. And
what a double feature.
It really is. And you know, this is definitely a bit of hyperbole here, but walking out of Van Wilder thinking like this guy has the potential to be like this generation's Bill Murray. Like really funny, really great chops, kind of smug, kind of like a lovable asshole. Do you know what I mean? Like the kind of guy that like he's a bit of a prick, but you can't help but like him. And
yeah, I didn't even think of. I didn't really think of that kind of comparison, but yeah, kind of, yeah. Hotter version of Bill Murray.
I don't know, man. Young Bill Murray, I think, can get it. Well, yeah, young Ryan Reynolds is pretty. Yeah, young Ryan Reynolds. It's like you look at the Amityville Horror shirtless. That's awakening for a lot of people.
Oh, I mean, him chopping that wood is just. Yeah. Oh man, that's peak. That's peak right there.
Yeah, that wasn't the only wood getting split when he was chopping shirtless. Is the backlash here it feels like the backlash is here for him at this point. It feels like it's coming.
Oh, like in Blade Trinity?
No, in general in Ryan Reynolds. It feels like
right now, yes, definitely.
Deadpool Wolverine's going to be huge. Like the pre-sales for it are already off the chart. It is going to be the movie that quote unquote saves the box office this summer because every other article written in every other entertainment trade publication is like, our movie's dead and our movie theater's dead. And it just becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like if you keep telling people over and over movie theaters are dead, people will just stop going. Like it's like, oh, I guess we don't go to the movies anymore. But I think this will be the movie that will take all the money this summer and will make people happy. But it also feels like there's a lot of backlash for this guy right now, and I'm not sure that it's deserved. Like he just hasn't seemed to done anything that would deserve it, aside from the fact that he doesn't really act. He's more of a persona than an actor at this point.
I mean, I think that's what it is. Like, yeah, like Ryan Reynolds isn't a bad guy. Like, and it's like, and it's kind of funny because it was like, you know, Deadpool happened, you know, a lot because of his passion behind it. But then now people are like, oh no, now you're too much Deadpool. Stop Deadpooling. You gotta stop, Ryan. So yeah, it is, I think, kind of the persona angle. And then also, again, like, I feel like it's just a thing of him making a lot of these like safe movies that are just to make money at this point, which hey, he is a businessman. You're like, you know, you gotta give him his props, whatever. But you know, it's like, hey, at least make it look a little less obvious, like look like you like are still trying to act and like do interesting things, because that's the thing. He's a super talented guy. The Voices is one of my all-time favorite films. And
that's a really good one.
And that's far and away his best performance. So it's like he's, capable of doing plenty of stuff, but then like you're looking at, it's just like, he has a cameo in Bullet Train. And then it was like, did anybody watch The Atom Project? Did anybody watch Free Guy? Like Red Notice. Did anybody watch that? No, so it's like, I don't know. It just like kind of seems like he's, just like making these movies that are supposed to be for everyone, but they're also kind of for nobody.
That's the Netflix movie model.
Yeah, exactly. Which I'll say, like I liked Six Underground. I'd say that's probably like the last thing I legit enjoyed that he did, and I might be one of the few people that enjoys Six Underground. But Hitman's Bodyguard, that was also I think still pretty fun. But yeah, it's just like, I don't know. He just doesn't seem like he's has his heart in it, and that's like I think that the disingenuousness that kind of comes off as like kind of what upsets people.
If he threw more movies in like Voices and like Buried, one where he pretty much carries that movie single-handedly, and he plays that whole movie while like lying in a coffin, buried alive underground. If he made more choices like that in between these pictures, I think maybe that backlash would recede. But not everybody is going to go like the Robert Pattinson, Daniel Radcliffe route, where you do these franchise pictures, you make your money, and then you see these two actors basically
just get to be weirdos.
Make very interesting choices. Like Daniel Radcliffe is like, I'll play a flatulent corpse, and then I'll play Weird Al Yankovic. Like, I love Daniel Radcliffe. Like, the man can do no wrong, but not everybody's going to go that route. Like, some people want to start cell phone companies.
And sell gin. He has his own gin. And I think, and it's probably also jealousy, because wouldn't you be jealous if you were of somebody married to Blake Lively? Of course you would be.
Probably. Well, you know what? I married my own Blake Lively.
Oh, that's very sweet.
I'll just say that. Yeah, I'll just say that. She's very lovely. Horrible taste in men, but aside from that. But other than that, like, there's also like a bunch of like smaller character actors that are like fantastic here. I'll just mention briefly, Callum Keith Rennie, who plays Asher, who plays like Parker Posey's brother in this. He is a great like TV actor. He comes and goes in a lot of like sci-fi shows. He's about a year or so away from appearing in Battlestar Galactica, where he's going to play Leoban. It's a recurring character in there. He's one of the 9 Cylons, basically, and it's a fantastic performance. Like, he's really solid in that show. I don't know if you've ever seen like Ronald Moore's Battlestar Galactica reboot.
No, I have not.
It's super solid. I'm due for a rewatch on that. Didn't quite stick the landing, but honestly, so many of those shows from the mid-2000s didn't, but he's great in that. John Michael Higgins, who plays Dr. Vance, another guy that is like, if you have like a cult favorite TV show or animated show, he's been in it at some point. He's the lawyer in Arrested Development that doesn't like ever make any jokes. Like, he's very serious. He can recede into the background. He's another guy that pops up in a lot of like the Christopher Guest mockumentaries. He basically can steal any scene that he's in at any point.
I love John Higgins. He's great. One of my favorite comedies, Fired Up. He is the like leader of this cheer camp, and he is so funny. He has one of the funniest character intros I've ever seen in a film. Like, he's great.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Dominic Purcell? This is a guy I feel like I know of him. And I remember him like being in that show Prison Break, which I'm looking at now. Like, that show ran for 90 episodes, which blows my mind.
So
like, that astounds me.
Dominic Purcell, definitely more of a TV guy. I mean, he's been in quite a lot of films, but definitely more of a TV guy. because he would also, because most recently he is in the Greg Berlanti superhero DC universe for the TV shows. He was in The Flash. He was like a recurring villain, and then he was a main star on Legends of Tomorrow as Heatwave, where he's actually really fun. He's a crowd favorite, actually. But here in this film, oh man, like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess he kind of has the look of Dracula, but also not. Like, I don't know. Like, and he just like his performance is awful. Like, he's like, like, I think he might be the worst part of the film is his performance. Like, it's not good. Like, he is so stiff and like just like giving nothing of Dracula, like, and they're trying very hard to be like, this is a different version of Dracula, this is not your Dracula from the books, you know, like, and it's just like just nothing about it works, and unfortunately he is giving a very wooden performance.
I'm gonna put a challenge out there to our listeners, because I know some of them like sit on horror panels and conventions and film festivals. You know, like I can, you know, like Brian, one of our co-hosts, Brian Kuiper, who's our classic horror aficionado. I can easily see Brian sitting on a panel talking about like Dracula in cinema, right? Mm-hmm. And they would ask like, okay, what's the best portrayal of Dracula in celluloid history? And people are going to ask, like, is it Lugosi? Is it Christopher Lee? Is it Max Schreck in Nosferatu? Like,
no, it's Attenborough in Van Helsing, actually.
No, I want Brian Kuiper to be on a panel and be like, actually, it's Dominic Purcell in Blade Trinity, and just sell it and just absolutely, you know, like that. $100 if you send me video proof of you doing that.
They're like giving. It's like giving Gerard Butler's version of Dracula, but without the sex appeal, is kind of what Purcell is going for in this.
He's got a very shiny head.
He does have a
Just
very
say
shiny
that.
head. And like a very thick neck. His neck is one big muscle.
Yes, but last but not least, like at this time, you got Triple H, Mr. Paul Levesque himself, now the head of WWE Creative, the man who's turned it around, kind of seeing like what's going on with The Rock getting movies and seeing like what's going on there. We're like, I want to be a movie star too, and this is his foray into feature films, and it would not be a long foray. I think very quickly he learned that he is much better on the small screen, in tights, in spandex.
I mean, this is the time
suplexes.
I mean, this is the time when they were trying to put a lot of wrestlers in movies, and we would see that continue. Like, because I know, like that, See No Evil comes out a couple of years after this, with
Cena
Kane.
Was the Marine,
and then Cena. Yep. So like, Cena's turned out to be one of the best, though.
Absolutely.
I think him and Batista.
Yeah, I would rank it Batista, Cena, and then The Rock in terms of like. The Rock has probably had the most lucrative career, and Batista has like the best overall chops, but like Cena is probably the best comedic actor of the three. Cena is not afraid to make himself look ridiculous. Ricky Stanickity, that Amazon movie that came out earlier this year, is like way funnier than it has any right to be. Like, absolutely, like the kind of movie that if it was made mid to late 90s, early 2000s, would play on 3,000 screens and make over $100 million. Yeah. Like, easily would have done that, but now we no longer put comedies in theaters because we don't think people will see them. It's ridiculous. I don't get it. I don't understand it. We've lost our way as a culture.
Yeah, and but Triple H...
He's okay here.
But Triple H, he's okay. He's definitely not as funny, but at the same time, apparently it was a similar situation to Donald Logue, where Goyer thought he was funny and like making a fool out of himself, so they wrote Triple H into like more scenes for this one as well. So kind of a similar thing. My one thing about Triple H's character in this is he has silver fangs, but vampires infamously don't like silver. So does he have fake silver
Has to be fake
He's
silver.
rocking some sterling silver in his on his fangs, which makes it even more lame.
That's a great point. That is a great point.
Why didn't they just make it gold? Like, I don't know. I'm thinking too much about this, but that was
You're
the
thinking
question I
about
had.
it more than they did, I think. I think you're thinking about it. Well, speaking of Goyer, he comes back like after Blade. So that's the cast, and it's an absolutely stacked cast from top to bottom.
And Natasha Lyonne, Happy Pride.
Oh, that's right, Natasha Lyonne, who
The gays would have been very mad if we didn't make
Right.
sure to shout out Natasha Lyonne, also an indie darling from like the
Yeah.
90s, similar to Parker Posey.
this is kind of like her in between stage. Like she's definitely, from what they say, like she's really struggling at this point, and she's been really open about her addiction struggles and her personal struggles, and she's kind of like, from what I read, was at a lower point during this, and she's gone on between, I think, Russian Dolls and Poker Face to have a real career renaissance again. And I mean, she's awesome. I mean, you can see what she brings to the table. But yeah, she has a smaller role here in Blade Trinity, like in Patton Oswalt as well. Like Patton Oswalt comes on for like 2 scenes just to kind of show up.
Well, we'll get to him here in a moment.
Oh yeah, he's
obviously.
gonna stir some shit.
But
So-
yeah, Natasha Lyonne has been in a few genre things as well. I love her as the spoof version of Reagan in Scary Movie 2. That is my favorite thing that she's done.
I'm going to be honest with you. I am so far behind on the Scary Movie movies.
Oh my god, should we put those on the wheel for next year?
You can put it. You know what? I would allow them on the wheel. They are, and there's a new coming out.
Oh,
So it would be.
Oh yeah,
timely.
there is.
It would be timely. If we wanted to put those on the wheel, I don't see why we couldn't do that. She did in 2016. She did an indie horror movie called Anti-Birth, which I remember watching most of at the Boston Underground Film Festival, and just like, I just wasn't in a place where I could finish it. I'm like, it's her, Meg Tilly, Chloe, I'm going to mispronounce it, Chloe
Sevigny.
Thank you. And it was really good, but it was a lot. And I'm like, I'm not in a place where I can finish this movie right now, and I need to go back and finish that. But so she's done some like interesting genre work as well. But yeah, we could put the Scary Movies on the wheel. Like, why the fuck not? Like, what's to stop us, right?
Those would be fun to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Dear God, get to 500 episodes somehow. All right, so after the success of Blade 2, Del Toro's approached, but he quickly turns it down. He wants to work on Hellboy, like that's his dream project. He does collaborate with Goyer on the picture. He offers input on the story and on like the creature and character design. So he does like earn a thanks in the credits. The movie's offered to a German director, Oliver Hirschbiegel. And I don't know why. Like there's nothing in his like previous filmography that suggests like why he would be a good director for this. Like there's nothing that's like in the horror genre. There's nothing in the action genre. There's really nothing after this either that suggests why he's a good director for it.
I guess maybe just because he would be like maybe a studio kind of guy, because it's like kind of giving the same thing whenever they were like, hey, we should give this John Watts guy the keys to the Spider-Man movies.
And then he hits it out of the park. Yeah, after one romantic
the guy
comedy.
that did Cop Car. Okay, yeah, that totally screams Spider-Man. So maybe it's sometimes people just see things in other people. I don't know. I never heard of the guy.
Yeah, but he does the Hitler biopic Downfall, which are on like the last days of Hitler living in the bunker. And if you've never seen that movie, I guarantee that if you were on the internet in the 2010s, you've seen the one scene of like Hitler having a freak out, but it's usually the subtitles, because it's in German, the subtitles are not what's on the movie. Like basically it'll be like whatever the freak out of the day is, like Xbox game. Like it's kind of hysterical, like how just look up like Hitler downfall memes basically. Like there were like a bunch of videos that were done and they're pretty hysterical. It's probably the only time I'll ever say Hitler was really funny. Please don't take this out of context. So that is like, there's a scene in that movie where Hitler is around like his table. The war is lost. He knows it. Everyone else knows it, and he has an epic meltdown.
999.
Yes,
Yeah.
that. So you've seen it. You've seen that scene if you haven't seen Downfall. Yeah. So congratulations, Oliver Hirschspiegel. Like you live on forever for giving us that. So Goyer is, he's brought on as a producer, a writer, and then he's like, well, now you're going to direct it. And then the troubles begin. Let's talk about the troubles. Devaughn, where do you want to start with this? Where should we begin?
So as I mentioned, I think Wesley Snipes was feeling a way about not being the spotlight, even though I still watch the film. It's still Blade's movie. And like, yeah, there's a lot more people around him, and like, yeah, he has a team now or whatever, but like the team is also dispatched in like one scene. So it's like, it's what, like, so like on one hand, like, I mean, I get like this is his baby and he's an executive producer on this one. So like he is supposed to have input on certain things, whether it be the castings, whether it be script changes and stuff like that, like he is supposed to have. So apparently they, weren't kind of giving him his kind of due, is from Wesley's perspective, at least. But then, of course, I think Patton Oswalt, part of his, uprise in comedy is like he was going around to like many different like talk shows, and people love to ask him about his experience making Blade Trinity with Wesley Snipes and the stories that he has kind of told from it. Most of them true. I found an article where Wesley Snipes was getting interviewed in 2020, and basically saying some of it. He's like, yeah, no, that part's true. This part's not.
I've got that quoted here too. Yeah.
Yeah, so lots of stuff leading to Wesley Snipes, just refusing to film certain scenes. He would apparently, just like lock himself in his trailer, smoke a bunch of weed, which, hey, relatable. That's what I would do if I'm throwing a temper tantrum. And then so he's not doing that. He's communicating via Post-it notes. Signed as Blade, which I mentioned again. I think Del Toro started calling him Blade, and then he took it too seriously for this one. Yeah,
it's a weird thing. Like I have the article pulled up. Like it seems like a lot of the. It seems like there's really three main sources of people reporting on Wesley Snipes' behavior on Trinity, and it became like gospel truth. Like Wesley Snipes was a nightmare to work with on Trinity. David S Goyer, his reporting of like the incidents behind the scene, like I'll talk about some of the things he said. There's a writer from Spin magazine, Chris Perry, who was sent to do a set visit and do an article on the behind the scenes of the movie. And it's so chaotic that Spin cancels the article, and Perry would go on to write about like what he witnessed and experienced on set. And a lot of the quotes are from unnamed studio executives, like persons that didn't want to go on the record about like what they witnessed for like some of the treatment. And then Patton Oswalt's the third, like there's an article on an AV Club where he does like back in 2012, he does like a pretty long interview on all of the movies he had done to that point in his career, and he tells some like behind the scenes stories in all of them. And Trinity is the one that seems to have like really captured the imagination. Like you had noted, the things he talks about are like Snipes like staying in his trailer all day long and just smoking weed, and Oswalt being like, well, that's cool with me. I'm just going to watch my DVDs in my trailer all day. I don't really have much to do if he's not here. he talks about Snipes being really angered that there was like one black extra on set that was dressed in a shirt that said garbage, and when Snipes saw that, he said, like, there's only one other black guy in this movie, and you are making him wear a shirt that says garbage. Like, this is fucking racist. Like, it kind of sent him into a rage, and it really soured the relations between him and Goyer. Oswalt would say that Snipes tried to strangle Goyer on set, like actually physically got violent and tried to strangle David S. Goyer. And I think in the article that you mentioned, like with Snipes referencing Oswalt's, what Oswalt would go on to say, he's like, let me tell you something. If a super muscular black dude tried to murder a white director on set, he would be in prison. Like, he wouldn't be allowed to continue making the movie. Like, you wouldn't be talking to me today about it. I would still be in jail for that.
Yeah, so, like, at that point, like, so, like, obviously, because, again, Patton Oswalt, he's a comedian. He tells stories. He's going to make them more dramatic and embellish, you know, whatever, you know. And because, again, like, he is in only, like, 3 scenes, so how much was he even on set to, you know, see all of these different things, you know? So, like, yeah, it is kind of one of those things. So, like, I believe Snipes on that part, but in that article, he did go, he was like, yeah, no, I did communicate via Post-it notes, but then he said it was, like, a production thing, like, oh, well, if the walkie-talkies weren't working, and it's like, okay, sure, Wesley, whatever you say there. So I do believe, like, him signing a Blade at the bottom of Post-it notes, like, that definitely tracks. But, like, there's not as much, because Oswald also, you know, talking about, like, you know, how much Wesley Snipes is in the film, and I did try to really watch for that and on this time around, and he's definitely exaggerating on that aspect as well, because, like, I mean, yes, I can totally see in certain stuff, like, if, like, you know, like, if his back is turned, like, yeah, you can sometimes tell that it's somebody else, but, like, I was watching during, like, the action scenes, and, like, he's present for most of it. You know, he's there for a good portion of it. He's there delivering dialogue and interacting with the actors. It's not like they, like, have a random stand-in, like, standing there quietly in, like, random scenes. So, like, again, Patton Oswalt, I don't know how long he was on set to, again, witness how much coverage they were getting of actually Wesley Snipes, you know? So it's like, I was watching it, and I think that part is a little bit embellished as well, because he's in it for a good portion. But yes, you can totally tell at certain points it's not like Wesley Snipes. He's getting a little bit older. He wasn't doing as many films around this time, and it was also in fashion to hate on Wesley Snipes around this point, because this is when all of his tax stuff starts coming about.
Just starts percolating.
Yeah, so it's like, it was in favor to just instantly believe, like, oh, of course he was going crazy on the Blade Trinity set, you know. So, you know, as far as, you know, the fact and fiction, kind of hard to tell with this whole thing.
The Wesley Snipes is barely in Trinity rumor was also that Chris Parry, who the writer for Spin, that's something that he also said. And he was like, well, if you watch the movie, like, Snipes wouldn't come out of his trailer, refused to appear, and he's only in the close-ups, and most of the movie, any long shot, like, and most of the film is actually his stand-in. So this was, like, the first time I had ever watched the movie. And I've got a really good screen. Like, I've got a pretty big screen. I watch it pretty closely. And I'm like, number one, there aren't a lot of long shots to begin with. Like, it's not like most of the action is taking place with these huge, like, sweeping cinematic. Like, no, everything is pretty close up in frame. So I would say a good, like, 90% of the time you're watching Wesley Snipes on screen, and the things that maybe he's not on screen for are things you would have a stunt double on screen for anyway. What I do think is pretty obvious is there are a lot of cutaways where you have, like, Ryan Reynolds is talking to nobody, and then it cuts to a very stoic Wesley Snipes, like, no selling the line. Like, that is pretty obvious to the point where it's, like, very, very funny. But I don't think this is a movie where it's not Wesley Snipes in this for like 9. That seems again to be like another urban legend. And one of the things you said is like Snipes he is an executive producer in name on this movie, and to that degree he's supposed to have some input on the script, on who's going to get hired for the cast, on who's going to get hired for the director. And I think at one point he says like, I don't think Goyer is the right guy to direct this movie, and anything he suggests is summarily dismissed. Like he really he's just treated like another actor, and he's not treated like an executive producer. Mm-hmm. I can imagine that would be extremely frustrating if you feel like you want to have a hand in the creative process, especially coming off of Blade 2, which he described as like a very collaborative with Del Toro. Like Del Toro talked about scenes he created on the spot because Snipes would say there needs to be more action here. What if we tried blank? And Del Toro being like, you got it, Blade. Let's see if we can do it.
Oh yeah, and
Del Toro again, is awesome. I mean, Del Toro is just the best.
Yeah, and I think, again, you see those frustrations then like kind of leak into his like animosity with Ryan Reynolds. Because again, like, he kind of feels, now he's getting disrespected as an executive producer. He feels like Blade is getting written out, his character is getting written out of his own movies, so you have Ryan Reynolds, and again, with the idea that him and Jessica Biel, they're supposed to do this spinoff. So it's like, because, and especially it looks that the optics of it are, hey, we're going to replace the aging black action star, with the young, hot white people. And so it's like, obviously the optics don't look great on that. So I can also understand the frustration, but maybe not in the way that he went about it. Because I think, by that point he's just like kind of, it's just a stew of bad vibes going on. Apparently calling Ryan Reynolds a cracker a lot throughout the film, which is kind of funny to think about. Just like in my head, just thinking of Wesley Snipes being like, "Watch it, cracker."
He would call Biel that girl. Like
that should have been a Key and Peele sketch. Oh my gosh, that'd make a hilarious Key and Peele sketches. Wesley Snipes and Ryan Reynolds interacting.
Good Lord. So Snipes in later years, like closer to, like you said, like 2012, 2015, like Snipes is kind of person non grata in Hollywood. Like he spends 3 years in prison for tax evasion, but he's come back. He's made some movies, not at the level that he once did, but he's given interviews since, like in 2018, 2020, and he's kind of talked about his experience making this movie, and he's been very diplomatic, all things considered, that have kind of been put on him during this time, especially during a time where he wasn't really able to kind of push back on a lot of it. And one of the things he said is like, when we made the first 2 Blade movies, we made it a point to make them multicultural, multiracial. We had a lot of roles for Black actors, and that was something that was really important to me. That is something that, I wanted to make sure that we continued. If you look at the first 2 Blade movies, there are a lot of persons of color that are working on that movie. If you look at Blade Trinity, there are not. And I think he has a really good point. I think that especially if you're an executive producer and you're like, why is this movie so white? And I can understand his frustrations with that. Like, you're telling me that when that whole cast that we listed, we went through, like, that's an incredible lineup of persons, but it's a very white lineup of people. And that is something that in 2024, I think we know wouldn't fly at this point. Like, it probably is not going to get past the production team. They're going to say, wait a minute, we need to, make this look like more of a reflection of our audience, especially a movie like Blade. Like, that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, like, again, because, I mean, that's so just, like, inherent to the legacy of Blade, is, the blackness behind it, and it is very unfortunate, like, yeah, because, like, I didn't really notice until, like, on this rewatch that I was like, oh, yeah, like, it pretty much is everybody. It's like, oh, yeah, but no, we got a black getaway driver. Mm-hmm. There you go, Wesley. It's like, come on, like, we need to, like, kind of try harder, and like, yeah, it's a little upsetting.
Yeah. Snipes has said a lot. And I love, this is the quote from Snipes denying strangling Goyer. If I had tried to strangle David Goyer, you probably wouldn't be talking to me now. A black guy with muscles strangling the director of a movie is going to jail, I guarantee you. Did I go to jail for strangling him? Never happened. And I love that because he's probably not wrong.
Yeah, no,
right?
I mean, like, he's not wrong there. He's not wrong in, like, these, like, things that he says about Patton Oswalt, going around kind of, again, like, he was, like, there's, like, multiple clips he found on YouTube. So, like, Patton Oswalt, like, again, like, was, like, also, like, using this to, like, kind of benefit himself in a way to, be like, oh, hey, let me tell these funny stories, and, like, embellishing them more, and, like, Snipes, talking about them as, like, microaggressions.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, I was like, he's got a fucking really good point there, too, so.
Yep.
It definitely warranted. But, like, again, he's a professional. He's still, the movie got made, like, I mean, it got made. He does what he needs to do, and, like, and it's just unfortunate. And
I pulled out, this is from, I think Collider is where I pulled this from when he was refuting Oswalt's side of the story. He talks about, like, part of that challenge of being that person on set. Like, this is part of the challenges that we as African Americans face here in America. And this is from 2020 is when he gave this interview. So it's, pretty timely as well when he's giving this interview. He says, this is the part of the challenges that we as African Americans face here in America. These microaggressions. The presumption that one white guy can make a statement and the statement stands as true. Why would people believe his version is true? Because they are predisposed that believing the black guy is always the problem. And all it takes is one person, Mr. Oswalt, who I really don't know. I can barely remember him on the set, but it's fascinating that his statement alone was enough to make people go, yep, Snipes has got a problem.
And he's 100% true. Like, I mean, people are so used to hearing, oh yeah, the black guys caused a scene. They lashed out violently. Like, they did all these things. And then, like, to, again, believe it, especially, again, like, at the point where Snipes was in his career as well. So it's like, yeah, like it's very unfortunate, and it's like, and the way, he's kind of been able to reflect on it now, again, like, he's telling the truth, like, he's not like, saying like everything's all good, but he is, still like, like he understands that, like, it's kind of it's a systematic problem. The problem wasn't, the bad, executives at, the studio. It was, the people above that and, everyone impacting it in that way. Yeah. And he's, it's a systematic flaw, like not even just, the product itself. It's
already like cooked into the system, and unless that system changes, then you're going to always have those problems there. And Goyer had a lot of difficulties on this set. I mean, it wasn't just Oswalt's word. Like, Goyer has talked extensively about his experience. He just sounds very tired whenever he talks about this. So this is from 2016. He's talking to Uproxx, and he says, on making Blade Trinity, that was the most personally and professionally difficult and painful thing I have ever been through. And when he's asked, like, would you work on a Blade reboot? And I just made a note, like, all the way back in 2016, they're talking about rebooting Blade. He gives a very diplomatic, I'm not sure I would ever work on a Blade film again. And Goyer does not seem like a guy who turns down a lot of work. Like, he is always moving forward.
Yeah, well, yeah, and luckily he was able to hop onto Batman, not to after this, so I guess it worked out for him. But it definitely doesn't have fond memories. So
he hires like some bikers that he met to act his like protection for him because he gets very nervous around Wesley Snipes. Like, I don't have doubts that, like, Snipes maybe made a move or a threatening gesture on set, or maybe said some, like, if I get my hands on you, motherfucker, it's all over. I would shit my pants if Wesley Snipes said that to me, like, it'd be like, I'm just going to die here on the spot, sir. I will save you the trouble.
I don't know. I think I think Goyer is I don't know, like a little sheepish in all this. Like, hey, like like I'm sorry you had a bad experience with this as well. But at the same time, like, you know, we don't really hear any stories of like Goyer, like, you know, having Wesley's back either. And like, I could see Wesley especially being offended by this, you know, because they did work on the previous two films. So like, I don't know if it maybe was the, you know, the switching to the director chair and the power shift. And like kind of maybe that's, you know, the add to their bringing. Because like, I mean, this whole set, you know, sounds like some like teenage boy shit, honestly. Like, oh yeah, like let me walk by you with my gang of tough friends. And, you know, it's just like, but like, how does that make you look? The fact that you think that you need that, you know, is just like, you look silly now. So it's like, I don't know.
In Goyer's defense, again, if Wesley Snipes told me he was going to beat my ass, I am going to surround myself. I would throw children in front of me. I would surround myself by small children and just use them as shields, and then I would hop in a car and drive away. Anything it takes, Devaughn. I am not getting my ass handed to me by Wesley Snipes. Goyer holds a sit down, like a clear the air session with Snipes to try to like make things better. It does not go well, and I think that's when Snipes only communicates by post-it note from that point forward. At that point, he's like, I'm not fucking talking to this guy again, and that's when the post-it notes start. And Goyer has said, like, I have not talked to Wesley Snipes since this movie has wrapped, and that was in 2016. Snipes in an interview is like, yeah, I think we, like, this is from Vice in 2018. He's like, I think we talk sometime, somehow, somewhere. Like, Snipes probably doesn't remember Goyer. He's like, fuck, I don't know. Like, all you white people look the same to me. He's like, I don't fault him. Like, Snipes is a really, and part of it is he wants to make another Blade movie for sure. So he's very diplomatic. But part of it is like, he's understandably proud of the legacy of these movies, especially the first two. He's like, I don't fault him. I don't fault anybody. That's just what it was, man. Nobody thought the Blade stuff was going to pop off in the first place. It was an anomaly. All of it was an anomaly. It just happens over time. Nobody knows who was the one who struck gold, but everybody claims it. So he did what he had to do. We did what we did based on what we knew at the time, and that's the way it was. It was a wonderful thing where you can look back and say, hey, at the end of the day, we still did something great. Great people, great talent, great future. We laid the foundation for something bigger than we imagined. That being said, we were the products of those that laid the foundation for us, so Hakuna Matata. So he's got a pretty...
Snipes ending a quote with Hakuna Matata is hilarious.
Yeah, he's got a pretty, zen look on it. Now, part of that might be because, like, Snipes would fucking sue New Line Cinema after this movie comes out. Like, he does go on to sue New Line for $5 million, partly for, like, basically them violating his contract as an executive producer, saying, you didn't accept my input, you didn't allow me any input on the creative process, you still owe me points. Like, so he sues them for compensation, and he settles with New Line out of court. Snipes then got sued by his talent agency for not getting their proper cut. So,
which I wonder if that's then what led his other tax things getting looked into, probably around in that point. Like, oh, well, while we're suing you, let's take a look around. And then did not end well for Mr. Snipes in that aspect.
It did not. But I think all of this, basically, it leads to this idea that Trinity is a flop. Like, I think that is the prevailing thought, that, like, the first two Blades did really well, and then Trinity fell off a cliff, and that it's an absolute failure. And critically, it is. Like, critically, it's only a 25% at Rotten Tomatoes, which is not good. But the audiences still turned out for this movie. Like, the budget is higher. It's $65 million for the budget, which I don't know where that... I guess probably a lot of the cast because it certainly doesn't look as good as the previous two movies.
Yeah, definitely the cast.
But it makes $135 million worldwide, which it's down from Blade 2, but it's on par with the first movie. And by the time you add in like DVD, Blu-ray, TV rights, streaming, VOD, that's a tidy profit. Like, this is not a failure by any stretch.
Yeah, I mean, they're all pretty, like, have a direct correlation, because it's like all of them, the script or the budget increases slightly for all of them, but then, then so do the profits. So it's like they all kind of shake out to kind of performing around the same-ish.
So are we both Team Snipes? What it all comes down to, like, with all the craziness, with all the Snipes is like smoking weed and communicating with Post-it notes and threatening to do some beat downs, like, probably the behavior could have been better on set, right? He probably was like, some of that is true, and it could have been better. He's calling Ryan Reynolds cracker.
You can do without that. You can do without, like, again, like, kind of the, because part of it is, like, yes, like, he is, not getting respect that he is entitled to. But at the same time, it, like, it feels a little machismo-esque, like, hey, like, like, this is my character, this is my movie, this is, like, my thing. Yeah. And it is, like, this series is built on the back of Wesley Snipes, so it's like, yes, he is justified in a lot of that, but it's just like, don't call people cracker, like, that's a, you could have did with that. And, don't threaten to punch your director in the face.
But overall, I think we lean a little bit more Snipes in the in the argument than we maybe would have. Like, when you add everything up and you, like, look back 20 years later, and Snipes' arguments for why he was so upset, like, they make a lot of sense. Like, okay, that, you can understand his frustrations and him being shut out of the process, like, that being something that seems like very infuriating, very deliberate. What else do we have in the background here before we go into the movie proper?
There is, on the Blu-ray, it is the unrated extended edition, which does have a slightly different ending than the theatrical one, where Blade's body does not transform into, like, Drake that is taken in for the autopsy, so that way Blade could get away. It is still Blade, but he, like, wakes up and then, like, attacks, like, this nurse, and then Ryan Reynolds narrates that it's like, the arrow didn't kill Blade, it only slowed his heart down, and then now until his body is ready to awaken to fight again, and then it, like, cuts out. And then there's the alternate extended ending as well, where they are in a Shanghai casino, and it is Hannibal and Abigail and the Irish chap. They are hunting a werewolf in a Chinese casino.
As one does.
I guess that would have been the teaser for the spin-off, but then I guess they decided not to include it whenever they realized, like, oh, this whole thing was a mess. We probably will not get that spin-off movie.
Yeah. I've only seen the extended edition ending, and the alternate ending I watched, like, separate after. I haven't seen the original end where, like, the body transforms and yada yada. So I think, Goyer, I watched the bit where Goyer's like, you're never meant to think Blade's dead at the end of this, but it's kind of hard not to get that impression when you watch this ending, or that, like, Blade is, like, the bad guy at the end of this.
Well, the extended edition ending doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because it ignores then, because it still keeps in the scene where Drake goes, oh, I'm going to give you a parting gift. And that parting gift was him disguising himself as Blade for the whole body thing so Blade could get away. So if you keep that extended edition version in where his body doesn't transform and he just escapes out of the morgue, just doesn't even make sense. So I'm glad. So I think the theatrical ending actually is the best one, the better one.
Okay. Well, let's talk this movie. Let's dive into, we did all the background, and we'll just kind of dive in here a bit about Trinity itself. And I think as we've kind of gone on here, we've kind of talked a bit about the movie and made our feelings known, but there's still a lot to chew on here. And Devaughn, where would you like to start?
I'll start in saying that this is in the camp of this is not nearly as bad as people make it out to be. People like loop this in with like Spider-Man 3 or X-Men 3, which again, I also don't think either one of those are that bad. I think people just like being dramatic about stuff because like
I really like Spider-Man 3. For the record, I think Spider-Man 3 is actually way better than its reputation.
100%. But like, so I kind of feel the same way with this one. Cause I'm like, yes, it definitely is lacking, the Blade magic. Like it doesn't kind of feel like this movie doesn't feel like Blade as much, like it just in the whole aesthetic of it. But I don't think it's terrible. I think it is perfectly watchable, especially for the cast at least having fun. A few action set pieces are decent, but then again, it also takes a big step down in that as well. But I do think to start on a positive note, I do think what they try to do with Blade's character arc in this makes sense. And again, I think it makes sense, and so that also is like a tough thing when Wesley Snipes is like, oh, I'm not, Blade doesn't have as much screen time as he should have, or at least not. No, it's not Blade doesn't have as much screen time, and he doesn't have as much solo screen time, is what he's really saying. But I think it makes sense because, he tried to work with a team in 2, didn't quite work out. He's kind of untrusting, but then Whistler in this one, recognizing Blade's loneliness, and talking about, like, I love the line, Chris Christopherson, not in here for a long time, but he does make some impact at the club. He blows up the base and everything, but he has a great line where he's like, I see you, with your back against the wall, surrounded by enemies, alone, and it breaks my heart. Saying like, hey, you need to find some friends, you need to find some co-workers to help you with this whole thing. And that makes sense for, Blade as a character, because like the loner samurai has like kind of been his whole thing. But like it is like, yeah, how much impact is Blade actually having? I love that we find out he's killed 1,182 vampires and familiars, because Blade keeps count. I think that's hilarious. But yeah, so I think the character arc that they were going for in this makes sense. Just maybe wasn't written the best, or I think again, if they were wanted to collaborate with Wesley and figure out how to make that better, they could have did something. But I think they were on the right track. And
it's you want to see him with the Scooby Gang. I mean, basically, he's going to need people to help him out. He's always had
we love a team up at this point,
of course. And this is not too far away from like Nick Cage doing Ghost Rider. Like, don't tell me you couldn't do a little Blade and Ghost Rider crossover at some point. Like, that would have been a lot of fun. I think the other thing they try to do with his arc as well is like, and it's something they've tried to do throughout the 3 Blade movies, is this struggle of like Blade trying to wrestle with his human side and his vampire side. And you see that evidenced here. Like, it's like one of Dracula's like last lines where he says, "You're always going to struggle with the thirst. Like, you're
the
never
thirst
going to
always wins."
Yes, that's it. The thirst always wins, which to me sounds like a tagline for a Mountain Dew commercial, more so than something with a lot of pathos to it. But what do I know?
They talk about his thirst and his uncontrollable urges a lot. We don't really ever see the ramifications of these, like in any of the 3 movies. Like, like obviously we see him like kill a human in this, but like they don't attribute that to the thirst. Like, if they would have made that a thing to like tie it in as to like why he slips up and like ends up getting framed or whatever, that could have been there. But all they do is they just keep talking about it, and him talking to the little girl being like, "Oh, this keeps the bad thing inside of me in." And I love her response. She goes, "Well, why can't you just be nice?" And he goes, "Because the world isn't nice." Yeah. But like, yeah, they talk about all these things, but we really don't get to see it. So it's like, yeah, that ending for that being Dracula's final lines to Blade as he shows his respects, but then the thirst always wins. It's like, okay, but all the vampires are dead now. So like, what, you're insinuating that Blade's gonna repopulate the vampires himself. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think the issue I have with this movie is like it is definitely not as bad as its reputation. Like, it's still a pretty fun watch. Like, there's some good action sequences. Wesley Snipes is not phoning it in. Like, he's a lot of fun to watch on screen. And like the team of the Night Crawlers, like, they have some pretty good moments as well. So
Night Stalkers,
thank you. I'm so bad. So it's one of those things where, like, if it's on in the background, it's like not something I would immediately shut off. Like, there are some very fun bits to be had with it. I think the main thing is it feels very disjointed. There is some like very jarring tonal shifts that happen in this movie. Like, from one moment, it seems like it's going for that somber tone with bits of humor that are sprinkled into it that you see in the first two Blade movies. And then Ryan Reynolds comes on screen, and it's like 15 minutes of him practicing his like stand-up routine at the Ha Ha Hut for later on that night. And it's such a bizarre...
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is kind of weird in that way. The best way I can describe it is because I've done this before. When I put movies on at the bar, I've put all three of them on, and the first two is me watching it with the customers, and we're taking shots and we're being like, yeah, this is awesome. And then when I put the third one on, that's when I start like doing all my like side work and cleaning.
Sure.
And then I'm not really, but I'm still kind of watching it.
You like look up every now and again.
Yeah, that's this movie for me. Ryan Reynolds, it's interesting because so Hannibal King is a character in the comics, and he is a frequent partner with Blade, and they have an agency called the Night Stalkers, and they kind of do these like paranormal investigation like type deals along with the monster hunting, and so they work together a lot. So it's funny that in this it just turns into Blade and Hannibal King hate each other because Hannibal King is doing cracking wise at every single moment. It does get to be a lot for sure.
Allegedly, the line that Reynolds says, like, he really hates me, doesn't he, is like not a scripted line. That is like something he said when didn't think the cameras were rolling, and he was referring to like Wesley Snipes. I don't believe that story. Like, I actually don't believe
I believe that.
Because it just seems too perfect. Do you know what I mean? Like, the delivery of it in everything, it just seemed... And Reynolds, when he talks about making this movie, he's like, it was a lot of fucking fun. I'm like acting with Parker Posey, who's amazing, and I'm still a young actor learning the craft. And when he talked about Snipes, he's like, he was doing method, and I have a lot of respect for that. And you gotta... you have to like let him do his process, and it's really hard to be that vulnerable in front of 120 people on set, and you're that committed to the bit. And he was not going to say a negative word against. He's like, I had a lot of fun making this movie. I don't understand what all the hubbub.
He doesn't want Wesley Snipes under his bed, ready to choke slam him.
No, absolutely does not want that. He's like, I'll give you a 20-second head start, 1:20, and then he just snaps.
Which we do still get some great Blade-isms. I will say for a lot of them like letting Ryan Reynolds improv and like do his thing. Does a good portion of it not work? Yes. My favorite line though, because when it does work, it works. Is when he calls Danica a cock juggling thunder cunt. One of the best insults I've ever heard in a film. Is insane.
It is the most 2004 insult, I think.
Isn't it?
It is like, if you had to pull out an insult, like, what is the most 2004 insult you can come up with? That is probably going to be in the running, I think.
You know what's progress, though? That now is a compliment. People love you. Cunt is good now. People love cunt now. So, like, for Pride Month, for the most part, like, because, like, the UK people, like, your wife, they're a little bit more liberal with it. But no, on the internet now, like, because like serving cunt, like that's a whole thing.
I've heard
that's
serving
a whole
cunt. I've definitely heard serving cunt.
So it's not as harsh as it used to be for people. The gays have embraced cunt.
Okay. I have been advised that the phrase cunt should probably never, like I've asked, like, is it okay if I use cunt? And I've been advised, like, probably not. Like, I'm already saying it too much here, so I probably should stop saying it. But it's okay. So we've come back around on that word. It's okay.
Yeah, we're cool with it.
Amazing. Language is a lovely thing.
Isn't it?
It really is. The other thing is some of the plot lines that seem really interesting. Like, I really think the idea of Blade getting framed for killing a human being is super interesting. I think that is something that I could follow a movie of that. Like, that's actually, like, why hasn't someone thought of that sooner? That actually seems pretty smart. And it gets dropped probably about 30 minutes in. I guess maybe it's just used to set up, like, the whole escape scene and whatnot, but I wish we kind of followed more of that thread.
So it's fascinating because at first I remember I always thought the cops were in on it too. The cops aren't in on it. That was set up by Danica, like sending the psychologist and the main chief, the black guy.
He's in on it.
He is on, but James Remar and his homie, which I love a James Remar sighting. As a sketchy, or not as a sketchy cop, but just as a detective. James Remar might as well be one. I thought it was weird. This is the most convoluted version of we need to capture Blade and make everyone daywalkers. Now we're gonna spin him. We're gonna make him a public threat and make everyone scared of him and think he's crazy, and that to mask that vampires aren't real, because I guess the secret is almost gonna be coming out, but at the same time it's not, because then it's also about just like human farming and them still taking over the world. I don't know. The plot is for the villains is very, very endless layers. That's just like, again, they need to capture Blade. They want to make daywalkers. Because like we see in previous films, vampires are international. So this is on a big scale. And this film somehow reduces the scale because it's because Danica's we're running out of time and we need Dracula. And because Blade's killing us too much. And it's but then we hear how many vampires that Blade has killed. He really hasn't killed that many of you. So the scale is all off for the plan of this film.
Well, speaking of that, the talk show, right away, as soon as you have you have the police chief saying the only bloodsuckers I'm care about is the ones that pass the bar exam. But seriously, folks, there are, that joke goes over like a lead balloon. It's great. It kind of goes over when I was doing my Chris Christopherson thing, and you guys were what the fuck are you talking about?
That pretty much was my face. So that interview guy really sold that moment. That was pretty funny.
That is Eric Busigian, noted actor, fellow Armenian. Great actor, and I'm that's another, we should have put him in the cast list, but comes in for 2 minutes. He gets to eat for a little bit here, but as soon as Dr. Vance shows up and is the psychological vampire, so I'm that dude's evil, he's in on it, right away, and it's great. So that there's this conspiracy that's covering up, and you just can't wait for that to unfold. I'm a big fan of that, but you're right. The scales, especially after the second movie, where not only do you have vampires, you have this whole other offshoot of uber vampires that are faster and stronger and don't have the same weaknesses as your typical vampire. Now you've gone back to just your standard vamps, which have a lot of weaknesses, and that does scale things back tremendously.
Yeah, so I guess because they destroyed all the DNA sample stuff whenever they did it, but then we see that they made a dog into have a Reaper mouth, so they do still have the Reaper strain somewhere. But then we also see, because Drake is an original, he also had a Reaper thing. So I think that's actually an interesting tie-in between 2 and 3. that, like, you know, Reapers are very close to being optimal vampires, but not quite. And when we see Drake in his, like, monstrous form at the end, he has a Reaper mouth. So I was like, oh, hey. They tied the continuity together a little bit, but then also, yeah, did all this, like, kind of sprawling kind of stuff with it.
And that feels like Del Toro being like, I don't know, give the tiny dog, give it like the mouth that opens like the Predator. Like that just feels like...
That does feel like a Del Toro idea, for sure. What did you think about having Abigail as Whistler's daughter out of wedlock, that Whistler did teach her how to vampire hunt, but she hunts separately, and he never mentioned her to Blade?
I was doing math in my head because Whistler is approximately like 97 years old in this movie, right? I mean, like Whistler is old. Like you just see that here. And
Chris Christopherson still looks pretty good in it.
That is true. Well,
he still looks pretty solid.
I was going to say, like, if you go back, this movie came out in 2004. Peak Chris Christopherson is like 1970s. And if you go back and look at like Chris Christopherson when he's doing like Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, like he can get it. So I guess I can see it.
He was 67 at the time of filming.
Wow.
For this one.
And I think for patrons, I by the time this goes up, I will have posted my let me tell you about Chris Christopherson, like 10-minute rant that I did. This man lived a life. Let's just say that man has lived that 67 years. He had lived about 3 lifetimes in that time period. 67, really, like that's a hard 67.
Cigarettes will do that to you.
Yeah, that is there are many mornings of regret, many mornings of wow. Okay.
But I like him having his moments, and then we see him, like, you know, he sacrifices himself. But even though Blade still gets captured, Wesley Snipes' reaction for Whistler's death, where he like roars and then goes into this like weird stance, is so funny. Like I love that Wesley was like, yeah, this is how Blade would react to Whistler's death, is this. Yeah, so he like sacrificed himself and then is replaced by Abigail, who has, she said, yeah, I went as soon as I found out who my dad was, I went to him and started hunting vampires. So Blade Whistler just never mentioned her to Blade, apparently.
So I guess it's not as stupid as Bruce Wayne having a child out of wedlock with Talia al Ghul, Damian Wayne, and Damian being like an 8-year-old Robin that is like a master skilled assassin at age 8. Like, I don't think it's like that level of stupid. Like, dumber things have happened. I
mean, really, it just makes Whistler look like a shitty guy because he cheated on his wife and then they got killed by vampires. Like, goddamn, pour one out for Mrs. Whistler.
Wasn't his wife, like, dead by that point? Like, wasn't she already killed by vampires?
Well, because the original story, because they did a Blade 1 flashback in this, which was really funny, while to introduce us to Abigail. So it was because Blade asked, he's like, oh, I thought Whistler's family is dead. So he had 2 kids and a wife that were all killed by vampires in the thing. And then she said, I was born out of wedlock shortly afterwards. So that implies that Whistler, prior to his family getting killed, cheated on his wife, and then another Whistler kid was born.
Maybe he was cheating on his wife the night he wasn't home to protect.
Oh,
fucking Whistler!
Damn, Whistler!
God damn! Hope it was worth it.
That's cold, Whistler.
Cold-blooded. So she's fine. I mean, like, she's a fun character. Like, I would have watched her in a, I mean, she's like the boat that has like the weird ass UV ray thing going in it. They do whatever they can to like ugly Jessica Biel up at that introduction scene, and they can't do it. Like, it is it's really impossible to make Jessica Biel look bad. It really is. Like, she's one of the
right, whenever she's like trying to lure that like gang or whatever.
The Mountain Dew, like Do the Do vampire gang.
Yeah,
like
super funny.
Like, I firmly believe that Code Red Mountain Dew was created for vampire teenagers. Like, it's a marketing scam.
I don't know. I kind of wish they gave her a little bit more personality. Like,
Sure.
she's the straight man to Hannibal, obviously. But and like she has like her own style, like, like, and she's supposed to be like, like Blade's, kind of weird sister, not really, but kind of, in the fact like, oh, he prefers a sword, she likes a bow and arrow, like, oh, like they both do a thing, and like I love how her character trait, I love the way that Ryan Reynolds delivers it. She likes to listen to MP3s while she hunts. It's like a killer soundtrack.
That again is another 2004 trait. Like, she's downloading
making a playlist.
Songs on her iPod. You're right. That is right from her laptop onto her like iPod Classic again as.
Remember that? You couldn't just
make
a playlist on your phone. You had to actually make it on the computer first and then
download it.
Yeah, crazy.
And
good times.
So here's a little nugget that I uncovered too. Like, Apple is so big at this time, and Apple is like has such a stranglehold and the iPod is like such a so dominant in the culture. The iPod Classic is that they're not even paying for product placement. Like, they just are using Apple products in the movie. And at the end of the movie, when they're like, can we keep this? Like, Apple's like, no, but you can purchase them for a 60% discount. That's how, like, fucking money Apple is. Like, usually companies are paying, like, hey, can you put, like, that, I think it was like Microsoft came out with like the Zune around this time, like their MP3 answer to the iPod, which came and went very quickly. Like, they would pay millions to have that put in a movie like this. And Apple's like, you can buy our stuff at a steep discount, but we're not paying for product placement because we're fucking Apple and everybody knows who we are at this point. That's clout. I would love to have that level of clout. I have no clout whatsoever.
Crazy, and it's crazy. Yeah, in 2004, they should have did a commercial where it was Jessica Biel as Abigail doing like the dancing silhouette thing.
Oh, that would have been good.
Remember those commercials?
I do remember those.
Yeah, they could have had Jessica Biel doing that, but I think one of my favorite scenes is the capture and escape of Blade, or the rescue of Blade. I mean, I think the John Higgins interrogation is weird. It's like kind of like whatever. But this is where again some of my evidence. So he's fucking with Blade's brain while he's like sedated and and he's like asking him questions about being a vampire. He's talking so much about like, do you get sexually aroused when you bite or when you feed, and like, oh, this uncontrollable lust. And he's like talking all these things. Blade is not listening to a word because again, he does not care about sex. He cares about hunting vampires. He does not get any arousal out of any of this. He gets negative arousal from this. So that is, again, my because there's many more women for him to choose in this movie. He don't care for any of them.
He's also not super doped up, though. Like, he's also really drugged up when all this is going on.
If he's drugged up and he was aroused, then he would be like even more into it. He'd be like, oh yeah, I love sucking blood. Like it would be the opposite.
But I think it's the kind of drugs that make it very hard to get aroused. Like, he's kind of sleepy time.
Hey, I'm telling you, the grays matter too, Mike, and I think Blade is the ace icon that they deserve.
Okay. So my evidence to the contrary, and again, it's not textual, so I'm going to defer to you. But like behind the scenes, Snipes was pushing for a love scene between him and Jessica Biel. Like, he takes one look at Jessica Biel coming on set and is like, can this be the movie where Blade gets it on? Like, I know we've had two movies where like, I've given fist bumps and hugs, and I like stroked a woman's hair as she like burned to a crisp in the sunlight. But Blade needs to get his fuck on, and it needs to be with Abigail. And cooler heads prevailed, and we're like, we're not doing that in this movie. There will be no love scene, and that is, so in Wesley Snipes' eyes, like, he thought Blade was a sex machine.
Hey, and that's where the one point I'll say I'm glad he was wrong, because I like he keeps focus, and I also want to make like that be like kind of weird, because again, like, it's Whistler's daughter, and then like
super weird,
like I mean, whatever, like your pseudo dad's daughter, even though they didn't really hang out, whatever, it would have been weird, is all I'm saying. I don't think there's a place in this movie for them to fuck. I guess like when she's like doing her cry in the shower, maybe you see Blade walking, hanging dong. That would have been hilarious. But I'm glad that we keep Blade sexless.
Same. Yeah, so I'll defer to you because it's not in the movie. It's not part of the text. It's just
but I mean Wesley Snipes. I mean, of course, yeah. Could you blame the guy? I mean, Jessica Biel is gorgeous, and like he is, still an action guy at heart. So he's like, Blade needs to get his fuck on.
Yeah.
Nah,
so
no time.
Here's a question I had. It kind of ties into it. We had talked about the troubles in this movie, and we had talked about like the choice that Snipes made, like with his scream with Whistler's death, and that was certainly a choice. Do you think part of the problem, like, is Goyer's not only writing the movie or directing the movie, he's directing from his own screenplay, and I wonder if part of like the problem is when you're directing from your own words, like when you've written the movie a certain way. You have like a very specific idea in mind. Like, it's your screenplay, they're your words. Are you going to be less prone as a director to want to go off script? And I've watched a bunch of like Billy Wilder movies this week because why not? And like Billy Wilder is famous for, like, actors would ask like, what is my character's motivation in this scene? And Wilder would respond, your character's motivation is to say the words as I've fucking written them. Like, he basically, like, that is your motivation, do the scene. I wonder if, like, when you have a Del Toro or Norrington where they're not writing the script, they're basically rewriting Goyer's script, if they're more prone to say, sure, like, why don't we try things a certain way, because they're going to have their own ideas anyway, based on what's on the page, versus like, this is my script, I wrote it a certain way for a reason, I don't need your input, your motivation is like, say the words that are on the page. And then you have Snipes, who, let's face it, like, kind of created this character for the screen, has his own ideas on how it should go, and then he's frustrated because he's getting shut out of his creative process.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could definitely see that being the frustrations, because like you said, like Del Toro and Norrington were directing other people's stuff, so yeah, they already don't have like that attachment to it, and then are also listening to Wesley Snipes on like, what he thinks he needs best. So again, I think it is like some egos clashing to a degree, but I will say that I still think that Blade, I think Wesley Snipes probably only would do like him approved things for Blade, because like we still get Blade isms in this, because like I know definitely Goyer did not write the scene where when Abigail finds dead Natasha Lyonne and she's crying, and as she's crying, Wesley Snipes is just going, use it like 4 times in a row. That definitely was not Goyer, so it's like we still get some I think it's only Snipes approved dialogue for Blade, at least. For the rest of the film and like story wise, then yeah, maybe that might be where he was getting shut out a bit, but as far as like the performance and Blade as a character in this, still feels very much like this was like more input from Wesley Snipes. One of my friends woke up. She stayed over last night and she was hungover. She wakes up and she comes out of the room while I'm watching Blade Trinity, and it's the scene when Blade and Dracula are talking on the roof with the baby. And she just goes, what is going on right now? And I go, wait, just wait for it. And then like when he tosses the baby, and then Wesley Snipes in the most serious voice goes, coochie coo, to the baby. and my friend lost it. I was like, that's Snipes magic, baby.
Yeah. He still has those moments of like when he kisses his car in the second movie, like those good kind of comic booky.
Yeah. Or I forgot my sword. Whenever he does his superhero landing during the breakout scene.
Yeah. So
and I was gonna say that breakout scene is I want to bring up the difference in the action in this one, because this one is definitely the lightest as far as action goes. Like as far as number of set pieces, there's not really a ton. This one is a lot of walking and talking, and people in rooms talking and yelling. It's a lot of that going on in this. But the rescue scene of breaking Blade out, I think, is real fun. You kind of get to see a little interplay between Abigail and Hannibal, and like you get to see Danica and her crew in action. I think it's the one that like actually has like some energy to it. Like this is a rescue mission. They're breaking Blade out. They're getting swamped by vampires and police and whatnot. So it's like this is the one that actually feels like it has some juice to it. Because then the rest of it, like after that, like the next action scene we don't get isn't until Blade, Hannibal, and Abigail hitting the streets, where it's just them, a montage of them beating up a bunch of familiars, which isn't a great action beat, but it's really funny because like it's like, oh hey, Blade looks like he's having a little bit of fun because he has some people to beat other people up with,
and he can impress people with his strength.
Yeah, right.
Because I can imagine if you're like that good at whooping ass, you kind of want to show off a little bit. You kind of want people to go like, damn, that guy's good. Speaking of, let's talk about our two villains, because I think they're an interesting contrast. Like a comic book movie or a superhero movie to me is really only as good as its villain. Like it's not so much about the hero itself, which is why like a lot of people prefer Superman 2 to the original Superman, because you have that trio of villains, and why Spider-Man 2 is like one of the best superhero movies because of Alfred Molina's performance as Doc Ock, and you have Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight. You have these wonderful performances in the villain role. And Parker Posey in her performance is outstanding. Like if she had gotten to be, she gets to eat in this movie. She knows what she's in. She's really campy. She leans into it. The one Ryan Reynolds one-liner that I like is like, your hair is awful. Like you're looking at her hair throughout the film and you're like, what is going on with these hairstyles?
He goes, first of all, your hairdo is ridiculous.
Yes. and like it's a choice. It's a very specific choice, and I love it. And she's like, no pun intended, vamping it up throughout the whole movie.
Oh, for sure.
And she's almost like a Bond villain in this film. And I almost wonder if maybe in like this uber masculine world of Blade that the egos involved wouldn't allow a woman to be the main villain of a film. That because you're going to have like a rock'em sock'em punch out fight at the end, that you can't have like Blade getting his ass handed to him a little bit by Parker Posey. Like that just wouldn't be a good look. So you have to invent another larger man made of like muscle and
literally I was about to say like, yeah, like that definitely screams it when it's like, oh no, we can't have the female villain like use her wits and prowess to like out maneuver Blade and like all these things, because that's what they set her up to be doing. Like she's the one that comes up with the framing idea and all the stuff, and like the capture of him and everything. Like, so like, yeah, like why can't we just like have that and like her be an elevated threat in some other way, like them being the the new gen young vampires and they do things differently, like they totally could do that. No, we need to bring in the big old buff Dracula to come in, and like in even doing that is like, oh, we need Dracula to come back to beat Blade. And it's like, well, that's not a mark on your villain being intimidating. That's a mark on Blade being intimidating. Like, oh, Blade is such a badass that you have to get the first vampire to kill him. Blade's pretty badass,
Yeah.
like that doesn't really do much for the villain either, so it's like, yeah, I think it is a shame that she doesn't get that she kind of gets sidelined in the second half of the film in favor of Dracula, because I think it's ridiculous, especially like we pointed out, like she like kind of has this like even androgynous vibe to her that's like, again, these are vampires, the power level between man and women shouldn't matter because they're all vampires, are all supernaturally strong and fast and everything. So it does feel a little bit like any of the men involved in this being like, no, we definitely can't have Blade taken down by a woman.
Parker Posey.
We can't have that. Party girl? No, we can't do that. That's crazy. But so it's a little disappointing, especially again because Dominic Purcell, he's no Luke Goss, he's definitely no Steven Dorff either. So it's like so not only is he written in poorly, but then performed poorly as well. And their sword fight is like kind of lame, at the end. Like it didn't feel like this is like, the true showdown, between the two of them. I kind of like the parkour chase. I thought that was a little fun. But like their final showdown, like doesn't even like have the weight to it, because again, like Dracula, he's just walking around in this movie, and then they murders all the Night Stalkers, and then he just waits for Blade to come. Like he literally doesn't do anything in the film.
Luke Goss's character felt like much more of a physical threat. I think you said it when we did Blade 2. It's the first time you ever see
100%.
Blade sweat in a movie. Like he's working. Like he has to put on his working boots to fight Goss's character. And the stuff with, like, they don't even call him Dracula. They call him Drake. Like, he sounds like a...
That's the most 2000s aughts thing. Like, we can't call Dracula. Yeah. Even though we're going to have him walk into a clearly Spencer-coded shop and look at Dracula memorabilia. So they're like, aha, we're making him a joke. And acknowledging it, it's so weird.
All of the interactions with him and like Parker Posey's crew, they almost feel like they were like rewritten and reshot and kind of forced into the movie after the fact. Like at some point they realized like whatever they were doing with like Parker Posey and Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Calum with this wasn't enough. Like, no, we actually need a bigger villain, so let's write Dracula into the script now. And it feels like it was they don't really interact, like Dracula doesn't really interact with their crew all that much, and I don't really and even his thing is like, I don't really like these vampires either, so like I'm
that is actually the funniest part, that he like doesn't want to hang with their crew at all.
He's like, these people fucking suck, I hope they all die as well. Like he's totally cool with every other vampire being wiped off the face of the earth.
Yeah, he has his own agenda. Doesn't care about the whole thing, because that's the whole... Because it's so confusing. They bring Dracula back because they really need to defeat Blade. But then what? Then you have Dracula that is going to enslave you because you guys are obviously already scared of him. So, like, you really didn't think it through. So, it doesn't really make sense him being in here. You can still do, the eradication angle to the film using Blade's blood or something. Like, they could still do that. Danica could have had some other plan again to, like, take down Blade and, like, keep, the word about vampires under wraps or whatever.
Yeah.
They could have done all this without having Dracula.
Yeah. What do you think of them at one point, Hannibal handing Blade a Tomb of Dracula comic book, being like, this will explain everything? Like,
yeah, who are we up against? Here you go. It's it's silly.
It is what it is.
Again, like, we are more aware that we are watching a comic book movie. Blade 1 and 2 are not trying to do that. They are just like, hey, no, we're a movie based on a comic book. I think this is like now how Blade Trinity is firmly just now a comic book movie. Yeah.
So do you want to talk about the future? Like, do we think we have this one covered and we can jump ahead, or do you have anything else you wanted to?
I mean, not too much. Again, like there's like little things throughout this that are, again, like this still has some Blade isms and like stuff. I love the introduction at the beginning to Danica's crew, them flipping off the sun. hilarious, whatever. Like there's little tiny things. One detail that I noticed that made me laugh, because obviously Blade has tattoos. He has a chest piece that he does not have in the first movie. He does have it in 2 and 3. So that means between 1 and 2, before his Moscow trip, he went and took a trip to he treated himself to a tattoo after defeating Deacon Frost. He goes, you know what? I earned myself a new tattoo. Blade went and... So I wonder who does his tattoos. Do you think Whistler does them? Do you think he's talented in other things? Maybe Whistler is doing these. He has an artistic side, maybe. So like, I don't know. Little funny things like that made me laugh, because again, just like thinking of Blade also, or him going to a tattoo artist and like just giving them a design silently and then just being like, I want this, and that being that, like, that would be a funny short film as well, Blade getting tattoos, and
then not having any reaction,
none whatsoever
go into him whatsoever at all would be fantastic. No, I don't have too much more. Just again, like, You do feel that the movie is being pulled away from the character of Blade and being set up for Hannibal and Abigail to do their own spinoff. And I put, like, this is an early sign that, like, Ryan Reynolds isn't so much an actor as he is a personality. And it does get to be a bit much. I think the Blade no-selling any of his lines, like, it is unintentionally hilarious. Like, that is pretty hilarious.
But think about this: if they did get this Night Stalker spin-off movie, Ryan Reynolds would have been too busy to do X-Men Origins Wolverine. He would not have been Wade Wilson. We wouldn't have gotten him in Deadpool movies. Kind of crazy. So I don't know. That could be a good thing to some, bad thing to others. Who knows? I mean, I like the Deadpool movies. I think they're fun.
I enjoy,
but like, it is again. But he does get to, do that is peak Ryan Reynolds being Ryan Reynolds, which is also just Deadpool.
It gets to be a bit much. Like, it's like good for a little bit. Like, at first you're like, okay, like, this is a new energy. I kind of like it. It's something new in these movies. Then you hit like the 85-minute mark and you're like, this is adding about 20 minutes to this movie. Like, we're going over 2 hours now, and 20 minutes of it is Ryan Reynolds just doing his, like, shtick. And I'm like, I could cut a little bit of this.
Him going over the video footage of Danica and her crew is legitimately like 8 minutes of him, having 3 jokes for each character. It's just like, oh my goodness. Like, that's the point where it became a little much for me, but luckily in the second half, when he gets like, it's lessened a little bit when he's not on screen as much. But you know what? I think this is a perfectly fine, watchable movie. I'm not going to skip it if I'm doing a marathon. I'm going to watch it. And it has a few moments here and there. And again, if not for anything, I will always watch this for Parker Posey. Yeah.
In Snipes, it's funny because Posey in an interview talked about like how she was there to have fun and engage. And she's like, I felt like Snipes wasn't really there or present. But I don't get the feeling. I don't think he's quite as locked in as he is in the first 2 movies. He also doesn't have as good of directors to kind of maybe bring him to where he needs to be.
Keep him motivated.
Yeah. So there's part of that as well, but I don't feel like he's checked out. Like, I don't feel like I'm watching a performance where I'm like, yeah, this guy's checked out. I don't get that impression. I just think maybe the material's not there.
So not Wesley's fault
entirely. So wanted to end things on this series where we talk a little bit about the future of Blade and what's going on with the long gesticulating 4th movie or reboot, whatever it ends up being. And this is something like as far back as 2010 it's been speculated on. Like, this is Snipes talking to MTV and throwing talking about his experience and wanting to do another one, and also maybe throwing some subtle shade at Goyer as well. Like, really, like, as the kids would say, maybe serving cunt. There we go. Let's see if it is. So the first, since this is him in 2010, The first and second one were experiments, and we started to get better. If we do another one, it will reflect our maturity and our better understanding of the genre. I'd like to see a larger multiracial cast, and it would be great to have some rehearsals before some of the action sequences. Love that last line. He's like, it would be good to rehearse a bit more.
That's actually really funny because, like that is part of the problem in the action. You can tell it's like all cut up and whatnot because it's not as rehearsed and choreographed. You can totally see that.
We'll fix it in post.
I mean, at this point, would I? I think an apocalyptic old man Blade could be fun.
Yeah.
I think that could be a fun thing if Wesley Snipes ever was going to return to the role. I think that would like kind of make sense, like his version of Logan, in a way. I think could be interesting. Because the MCU Blade project is a total mess.
What's supposed to happen with it? When was this? Was this announced in like 2018? Is this announced
2019?
Right after Infinity War, right? Or right after Endgame?
So 2019 is when Mahershala Ali was introduced, and they do the Comic-Con reveal announcing the Blade film. 2019. And then, so the film was supposed to come out in 2023, but then got pushed. Supposed to come out this year, got pushed. And so right now it's supposed to be out sometime in 2025. They don't have a finished script. All they have is a story. I think they do still have a director, but the writers dropped, so they are doing rewrites again. Mahershala Ali joined the Jurassic Park franchise recently, so that kind of got the rumors swirling once again, because at multiple points during this whole lead up, there have been times where people are like, oh, Ali wants to walk, he wants to leave the project. So those rumors kind of started swirling again. As of now, he has not officially left the project. But those, it started coming about again pretty, like, literally while we've been doing this coverage. It was like a couple weeks ago. So I don't know. I at this point, with X-Men 97, like, let's just do like a anime version of Blade, like how they did like a one-shot project of. I think that could be a fun thing to do, like an animated Blade series. I think that'd be fun, but like at this point, I kind of don't really want him in the MCU because I have a feeling they're like having issues trying to connect him to the larger world when that's not what Blade does. He's a street level guy that doesn't need to be, so like at this point I don't really want it. It seems like it's gonna be a mess and it's gonna be trash probably.
This is like the 7th or 8th writing team on this movie as well, which to me is amazing. Like, it seems like a very easy concept. You have a large multiracial cast anchored by like a solid up-and-coming African-American actor, and audiences will turn out for a dude who fights vampires in a hard R Marvel movie. That is what people would like to see in something, like you said, not necessarily connected to like Avengers 5, right? And people will come out and they will turn out in droves for that movie. Like, give me a dude who's buff with a sword and a couple people behind him killing vampires, put it out in October, make it a lot of fun, give me some charisma, and audiences are going to come out. Like, it will make money, and it doesn't have to have like the same level of budget as a lot of the other Marvel movies. It can be like a mid-level budget. You don't have to make it for $160 million. At this point, I would just rather, if you're going to bring Michael Keaton back for The Flash as Batman, if you're going to have like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield come back for Spider-Man, because Sam Raimi's talking like, let's do Spider-Man 4, and the holdup right now on another Spider-Man movie seems to be like the producers want to bring back Garfield and Maguire, and Tom Holland's like, can we just do a solo Spider-Man movie? Like, do we have to bring everyone back? But they would like to do that. If you can bring back these older actors to come and wear the suit again, I gotta be honest, I would much rather watch like a Wesley Snipes, who even in his early to mid 50s is in incredible shape, has a ton of charisma, knows how to be a star, and knows the character really well. There is no reason why you couldn't have him as an aged Blade. doing like a standalone Blade movie. Like, why not? Like, what would be the hold up in doing something like that? It doesn't have to be a reboot. It could be a continuation. Like, that to me seems like it would be a hell of a lot of fun.
I mean, I think so too, you know, like, especially with like the way that this ends, they could do like a whole time jump type deal. They could tie it in with Guillermo del Toro's The Strain series if they wanted. Who knows? You know, there's avenues they could totally do. And I would never be opposed to Wesley Snipes doing a Blade thing. But like I said, like at this point though, like unless it's gonna be that, which it's not gonna be. Like they're, you know, very much decided on doing a new, you know, whole thing in the MCU. Like,
could you see them scrapping that and saying, okay, we're just going to throw this story out, we're going to bring Snipes back, and we'll find a way to tie it in?
I mean, I don't see it, honestly.
Okay.
Like, I think they are, I mean, they seem very committed to making it happen with, you know, as long as they've been holding on to this. So I don't know, but I mean, I would rather them just scrap it. Again, I would say either A, if we were gonna get like a aged Blade, but I would prefer either like a Blade animated series and let Wesley Snipes do the voice. Like,
sure,
like I would honestly prefer that if I wanted anything. Have like a real stylized like anime inspired like version. I think that could be like fun.
Okay. Well, speaking of fun, I think that brings our coverage of Blade to a close. Been a fun little trilogy to cover, like 3. First trip doing kind of like superhero action horror hybrid movies, you know?
Yeah.
There's more in that pipeline, you know. There's the Resident Evil movies, there are the Underworld movies, so maybe in the future we will get
Hellboy movies.
The Hellboy movies.
Yeah, we got some other eligible ones in there. So yeah, this was nice to like kind of get to scratch both itches of my, you know, love for horror and superheroes, and paying tribute to, again, I think one of the most iconic figures in cinema. Like I won't even say like in just horror or action. Like I think you could poll 100 people, show them a picture, and 98 people will know who Blade is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Devaughn, what do you have coming up for Spectre Cinema Club, and where can folks find more of you?
You guys can find me at all the usual places at _DaddyDisco, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and TikTok. You can hear Spectre Cinema Club, where we are celebrating Pride Month by talking some international Pride. So we got a couple French films. We just did The Handmaiden. We'll be covering To 10. And Knife Plus Heart. Like, we have a really banger lineup for international Pride as our theme. So you can hear us every Tuesday, and you can find Spectre Cinema on the socials at Spectre Cinema.
Excellent. And folks, you know all the places you can find us. Follow us on Instagram at Pod and the Pendulum, Twitter at Pod and Pend. Go ahead and leave us a review on Apple, on Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Make sure that you are rating, reviewing, and subscribing to us. And when you leave us a review and 5 stars, that does go a long way to folks finding our show and giving us new listeners. If you're so inclined, become a patron of the show. Go to patreon.com/Pod on the Pendulum, where we have a ton of bonus material up there. We actually have some pretty cool stuff going up this month. Not only do we have like full-length bonus episodes going up this month, I've cut a couple little bits, deleted bits from our Blade episodes that will be going up there. You can hear me wax
These are the Pod and Pendulum giblets.
Kind of like
putting over on Patreon for you.
Yeah, kind of like deleted scenes. Kind of like stuff that didn't quite make the show, but I thought were still worth it. And also, Steven did send me his dramatic reading of the Blade
I can't wait to hear that
review. So that is up there too for patrons only at Pod and Pendulum. Patreon.com/Pod and the Pendulum. So become a patron today, and it does like help us, you know, pay for things like Zencaster for recording and our hosting and editing and all those fun things. So that would mean a lot to us as well. And Devaughn, do you want to tell before we sign off what we're going to be doing? What's our next series? What did the wheel pick? Where are we going?
Oh yeah, so we are going back to the found footage well. We took a little break, but we found a bunch of tapes, a smattering of evil tapes that we're going to watch as we go through the VHS franchise. There are 6 films for it, so very excited to get into those. I already did watch all of them because I did a segment tier list, like for like each individual segment. So you can go listen to that with Donato, but now, which is great. So I already have all my notes organized by segment and everything. So I'm super excited to get into these films.
Beautiful. So we're hitting found footage and anthology territory. We're like, really giving ourselves quite the fucking
and that's
challenge.
new for the pod, right? We haven't done like an anthology.
We've done, like way back in the day, we did Creep Show. Like I think within our first like 50 episodes, we did Creep Show, which is like one great movie, one kind of sort of rewatchable movie, and then holy Jesus, what the fuck? Why does Creep Show 3 exist? So I think that is there's not like a ton of anthology series, so like we're not going to have, there should be, in a better world we would get more like mortuary collection movies, that Ryan Spindell's anthology horror.
We covered that one.
That was a really good one from a few years back. I wish we would get more of that. I think we should do, have you seen In a Violent Nature?
Yes, I did.
Probably do that for the patron.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be a good Patreon one. I'll hop on for that.
Yeah, let's do that. So for the patron page this month, we're going to talk about In a Violent Nature, which I think is a really fun one to cover. So, and that's it, listeners. Thank you so much. We hope you've enjoyed this series on Blade. We appreciate all of you. Happy Pride Month to everybody celebrating, and we will be back next week with the first of our VHS episodes. So be kind and rewind, I guess. Yes. All right. Take care.